Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to start our very short press conference concerning the Russia's frozen assets held in the West and to our understanding to be used in full extent for reparations and payments for Ukraine's benefit. As you know, the issue is not settled. I mean, there are different concepts which are all around. One, for example, is like we have to freeze and then use, meaning wind profit gains, which are estimated to be between 2.5–3 billion yearly. It's not enough, let's be frank. We should use more. I mean, we know that over the 300 billion Russian assets are frozen. So that's why we would rather call for freezing, seizing, and using concept to be fully in place. And today we have an excellent opportunity to listen to two prominent activists as well as experts. On my left, Sir Bill Browder, who is a champion for human rights campaign. As you know, Magnitsky Act is something what Bill established and still continue to oversee. Most welcome, Bill, once again to the European Parliament. It is very symbolic that we are in a Anna Politkovskaya press room. As you know, Anna Politkovskaya was assassinated by Putin's regime in 2006, and Bill continues her work, probably doing something different, but nevertheless, it's about human rights and about fighting the autocratic regimes worldwide. On my right, I have Yulia Ziskina. She's a senior legal fellow at the non-profit Razom, its organization, NGO for Ukraine, and attorney at Quinn Emanuel Urquhart and Sullivan, if I'm correct in pronouncing. She's specializing in financial enforcement and public international law. So with no any overdue, I can call on Bill to start our press conference. Bill.
Petros, thank you very much. And thank you for your work and your leadership on this issue and many other issues, including the Magnitsky Act, where you were instrumental. As Petros mentioned, I was spending most of my time over the last 15 years after the murder of Sergei Magnitsky to come up with some type of version of justice for his murder, and that ended up becoming what's known as the Magnitsky Act. And I spent many years working on the Magnitsky Act, and we now have 35 countries that have the Magnitsky Act, which freezes the assets and bans the visas of Russian human rights violators and kleptocrats. When the war started, when Putin, I shouldn't say the war started, when Putin invaded Ukraine, launching a war of aggression, I looked at what I could do to be helpful. And since I've spent so many years working with lawmakers, working with governments on sanctions, one of the most obvious things that emerged from this work was about a week after the war started, the Western allies froze $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves. And I said to myself, using the networks that I've created, using the contacts that I have, and using the credibility of the Magnitsky Act, I can go back to these same people and talk about how that money, the $300 billion, can be used to help Ukraine. And at first, everybody thought this was a premature idea. They thought the war would be over very quickly. They thought that all these things could be discussed after the war ended. There was a talk about the money being used for the reconstruction of Ukraine. But the war has carried on and carried on and carried on. We're now more than 3 years into the war. And we're now in a situation where I think it's fanciful to talk about the reconstruction of Ukraine when there's a possibility that there will be no Ukraine. And therefore, I think that the money should not be used for the reconstruction of Ukraine. It should be used for the defense of Ukraine. Now, there are various people who have been arguing against this concept since I began this conversation and discussion. And the main argument that they use is that, well, that this is all, we can understand the morality of it, we can understand politically how it makes sense, but it's not legal. And Yulia, who I've been on many panels and discussions with, will discuss the legality of it more in depth. But I would say one important thing, which is that the governments, the allies, have somehow come to the conclusion that it's legal to confiscate the interest on the money, but it's not legal to confiscate the principal. And I think that that's absurd. Either it's illegal and you can't do any of it, or it's legal and you can do all of it. And we're now in a very crucial moment in the whole, in this whole crisis. And the crucial moment is that the United States now has new leadership. Donald Trump has effectively said, in not so many words, that he's going to cut off Ukraine from American funding. America is responsible for 40% of the military aid for Ukraine, which means that if that money does not come from America, and it doesn't come from anywhere, then we're in a situation where Ukraine could easily lose this war. Europe has a very strong interest in Ukraine not losing the war because many other European countries are on the front line, including Petrus's country, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Poland, etc. And so Europe really doesn't want Ukraine to lose because that means that Russia will invade other countries. And so how does Europe handle this situation with America withdrawing from its support? Well, either Europe can increase taxes on all European taxpayers, which I think is a very unpopular thing to do, or alternatively, we can come back to Plan A, which is confiscating the Russian money and let Putin pay for the war. And so I'm here today at the European Parliament. We're having a very important session this afternoon under Petrus's leadership to discuss this and to advocate for the confiscation of these reserves, and I hope that we can move the ball forward.
Thank you, Bill. You're completely right. I mean, just recently, after so-called negotiations or meeting in Istanbul, we heard that the Russian delegation, led by Medinsky, repeated some 5 points plan. Among those 5 points, there was one: no reparations. Of course, I mean, they understand. I mean, the financial hit they might receive after the freezing and seizing the state assets, which are very abundant on the western side. Now we turn to Yulia, who is an international law expert, and indeed, I mean, some pretending, I mean, to call seizing the Russian sovereign funds as a declaration of war. Is it so? I mean, didn't Russia declare war on Ukraine, or we have to, or we are declaring a financial war against Russia? So who is who?
First of all, thank you, Bill, and thank you, Petrus, for this event and for your advocacy and for bringing attention to this issue at this very, very timely moment. Before I answer that specific question, I would like to provide some context as to why what you're asking and why we're talking about is so imminent right now. So when we talk about the frozen Russian assets, we are not just talking about numbers. We are talking about blood money that is still sitting in Europe and is still capable of more destruction. So why is that? So because Belgium, through Euroclear, which holds nearly 200 billion euro of these assets, has a historic opportunity right now. First, to ensure that these funds are never given back and used to finance more violence, but instead that they're used to support justice, accountability, and Ukraine's recovery. But the danger right now is real and imminent. In July, in just a few weeks, EU sanctions will be up for renewal. A single veto from Hungary or Slovakia, which lean towards Trump's camaraderie with Putin, could unlock these assets for the Kremlin and send them back immediately and irreversibly back to Russia. That would be a catastrophic failure for Europe. So there are two concrete steps that need to be taken. And that's what I'm here to communicate today, that there is a secure and lawful path forward. First, Belgium and other governments should direct their financial institutions to move these assets into separate accounts beyond the reach of Hungary or Slovakia's veto. This is a very simple administrative step that Belgium and others can and should take immediately. Second, countries where the assets are frozen, including Belgium, should establish an international trust fund to hold and manage these resources on Ukraine's behalf for urgent defense, also for reconstruction when that time comes, and compensation for victims. This is entirely consistent with international law and with the G7's existing commitment that these funds will not go back to Russia, and it is simply putting action behind this commitment. But to answer this question about would it be an act of war, which I believe the Belgian Prime Minister mentioned, that is a misplaced fear. This is not true. International law does provide that when a state's conduct is so egregious that it violates the very core norms and principles of international law, it's considered to affect the entire global community, and any third-party country has the right to take third-party measures against it to restore this international order and justice, even though they are not directly at war. International law provides this foundation. And there is also the point here that Russia, whether or not we like it, whether or not we accept it, Russia is at war with us. Russia is not just at war with Ukraine. Russia is at war with the entire Western system of values. If Russia succeeds in Ukraine now, it will not be its last step. Europe is next. So we need to be taking action now. And at this point, inaction is not neutrality. Inaction is complicity. So the argument that these funds could, we often hear, could somehow harm Europe's financial standing, well, that's outdated. The real risk right now is actually in doing nothing, letting the aggressor regroup and signaling that Europe can't enforce its own rules. That is the very real danger that we are facing.
Thank you, Julia. So now we are at the point we can take any questions from the audience. Are there any? Yes, please. You should use microphone. Yep, please. Yeah, that's right. Push the button.
Yeah, thank you very much for this briefing. So I'm Rakel Lennartsson, freelancer from Swedish written media. I have a couple of questions. So first, maybe for Bill, you mentioned, you said it is absurd to use the interest from these assets, but not the assets in themselves. So why is that? And then I would also like to know a little bit more about the positions of different member countries within the Council and what the Parliament can do concretely. What measures politically can you do to push this question forward? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So on the absurdity question, to the extent that there are people who argue that this disrespects the property rights of Russia, this disrespects the sovereign immunity of Russia, the property that belongs to them consists of both the money and the interest earned on that money. There's no separation. It's not when you put your money in the bank can't just take your interest away from you. If that's your property. That's Russia's property. And so when the decision has been made to confiscate the interest, it's already confiscating Russian property, and there is no legal distinction between interest and principle when it comes to property. And so the idea that somehow it's okay to take interest, but it's not okay to take principle, it just doesn't work under logic or under law. There's one other really important point, which is to add on to something that Julia said, which is the decision was taken to confiscate the interest, and then the decision was taken that a loan would be given to Ukraine of 50 billion euros or dollars. Was it euros?
Dollars.
Dollars. $50 billion, which would be then collateralized by the future interest payments. And so it was going to be a larger number than just the several billion that Petrus was talking about. 50 billion is not insignificant. But what happens in July if Hungary makes the decision to block any further freezing of the assets, and the money gets returned to Russia. What happens to that $50 billion loan? Who pays for it? The European taxpayer pays for it. And so the idea that we've borrowed money against future interest payments on principle which no longer is frozen and is returned to Russia creates a whole can of worms that I don't think the people who initiated this process even thought about.
Well, indeed, we are approaching quite a crucial time period in July when the Council has to renew sanctions on Russia's frozen assets. Well, I see certain risk that some individual member states, in particular Hungary under the Prime Minister Viktor Orban, might play a very dangerous game, again, in favor of Kremlin, not Ukraine, not free world. So that's why there is a certain risk, indeed. Let's recognize it clearly. And we have to build a very solid international European coalition who are proposing to continue to go with sanctions, and not just to freeze, but to seize those assets. I'm completely in favor of this concept, well explained by Julia previously. So it's not just, and kind of works for international law, but there are financial needs. Ukraine now facing some up to 600 billion of need to rebuild its infrastructure to compensate individuals and communities. So where that money will come from? So we are at very initial stage. So that's why it's not just a kind of empty political debate. It has really very well-based financial calculations. So I don't think the West can turn back to this concept of seizing assets. Which way to do it? There are good proposals, so let's continue. And I can tell you that the European Parliament is much in favor of seizing and using assets for benefits of Ukraine, reparation, compensation, rebuilding infrastructure. So we have proved our position not once, with a solid majority, and I hope the Council and Member States will follow the European Parliament's position later. Any more comments?
No.
Any more comments?
You have a question online.
Yes, please.
From Matthew.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Hi, Mathieu Bion, Agence Europe in Brussels. I'm just quite curious about the two-step solution that was proposed. Seems quite easy legally to do, but what fails there? I mean, because there is such an amount of money, and if member states don't move, it means that there may be something more than just a political will there, no? But then there is the ECB argument that there is a risk for the financial stability of the Eurozone if such a step is taken. What's your response to that? Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I speak to that? So Christine Lagarde, who is the head of the European Central Bank, has made this argument saying that the euro would be at risk if this money was confiscated. I'd like to make a more extreme argument, which is that if this money isn't confiscated, if this money ends up being returned to Russia, Russia will then have a financial advantage that they didn't have before, which is a $300 billion financial advantage. Ukraine won't have that money. And then what it does is it threatens the integrity of Europe, the physical integrity of Europe. So we're talking about this vague concept of the integrity of the euro. And I can say, by the way, as a financier, that the only people who are going to be upset about this will be countries that are thinking about invading neighboring countries. Nobody else will be. And I'll certainly be happy to hold euros, and I'm sure that many other people will be. But if Russia continues to become a physical threat to Europe, we'll all be sending our sons and daughters to die in battle with Russia to satisfy Christine Lagarde's concern about her hypothetical concern about the euro.
I could add on to that as well. There are very practical reasons why this concern is overblown, as numerous economists have and financiers have already stated. The real reason for this is that 89% of the world's reserve currencies are within the G7, the majority of which are US dollars, which is about 60%, and the rest Europe, UK. We can't exactly make the argument that the U.S. is a safe place to invest your reserves currently, so there is simply nowhere else to go. So the argument that there will be capital flight and this will undermine the financial system really has no basis. And when you point that out to critics, they usually don't have a response. This is usually some kind of a vague, fear-mongering point. The broader point, too, as Bill pointed out, and I want to emphasize, is that it's not a financial question. We should not be letting the banks and the ECB be making this decision. This is a national security question, with national security and international security at its core. And frankly, that is what we should be concerned about. Financial stability depends on predictability, transparency, and the rule of law. And this two-step proposal that I laid out, which is carefully structured action, which is grounded in legal principles, this would actually bolster Europe's credibility and not undermine it. What would really undermine Europe's credibility is to quietly return these assets to the aggressor. Then what happens to the euro?
Well, I think that the euro and eurozone will be better off if we, really protect our financial system from dirty money and Bill proved. How much of dirty money, corrupted money from Russia, from politicians were invested and might from different countries, not only Russia, to come to the European Union, as well as bloody money, as Julia said. So are we, to accept those authoritarian states and aggressors of today and probably tomorrow money and cheer because of this? And we will think that Eurozone is better off, better protected and more financially stable if we accept each and every dirty euro coming to our pockets and our bank accounts? I don't think so. So this is really more than just a financial stability and security. Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
See you.